This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
Reading the comments, people think I've lost my mind. John thinks I've lost my mind because I would even consider Kyrie Irving. I'm sorry, man. I've seen the guy play. And if you're not blowing up your roster, if you're not giving up a whole lot to bring him in.
You know what, Clay, let me interrupt you because Clay, I think that's where people lost both of us when we were talking about Kyrie, the level we were talking. So let's go through the quick rundown to give people our perspective. So I'll give you the yes or no game we like to play. Would you have traded Jimmy Butler for Kyrie Irving?
Nope.
Would you have traded Bam Adebayo for Kyrie Irving?
Nope. Would
you have traded Tyler Hero for Kyrie Irving?
It depends on if you are willing to pay him long term. And that's an internal decision that we don't know. So I would say, would I theoretically be willing to? Yes. Because I don't know if they're willing to give him a max contract.
Would you have been willing to trade Kyle Lowry?
Yes.
Interesting how the thoughts have changed there. Would you have been willing to throw in multiple first-round picks, 23 and 28?
Not in addition to those. So, and here's my thinking on Kyle Lowry. With Kyle Lowry, basically you would be bringing in Kyrie Irving to play the slot, not nearly the same sort of player, but to play the slot that Kyle Lowry did. So you would be changing how you would run the offense and obviously the defense as well.
I agree.
But I don't know that those two. I don't know that you run a successful team, especially defensively, where those two coexist on the floor at the same time. So basically, it's like, okay, now I'm not giving up Kyle Lowry and Tyler Hero unless you're planning on moving on from Tyler Hero after this year. But it's more about fit, and this is where I keep coming back to PJ Tucker and why I don't see any world. And there was another comment about overpaying him. I want to get to what we mean by that in a second, but I don't want to create an extra void, and I really don't want to create an extra void with somebody who was such a perfect fit with what you want to do offensively and defensively in PJ Tucker. And when it comes to Kyle Lowry, sure, when he was out there playing and you could rely on him, there was a difference in the team. But, man, how are you sure that you're going to be able to do that? So it's like the same questions you're asking about Kyrie Irving and whether or not you can be sure that he's going to play. Kyle Lowry didn't play a lot. And look, a lot of it was a personal situation. Yes. But the hamstring injury, but he said he'd never dealt with a soft tissue injury before. Well, man, I'm sorry, you're getting older. We all do. There are a lot of injuries I'd never dealt with before until I turned 38, 40 years old. It doesn't get better. And maybe you get lucky and you don't get hurt next year. But the bottom line is, like, whether it's for injury or not wanting to play or whatever, you have two players who could help this team, but you're not necessarily sure that they're going to be able to get out there and run.
So let's synthesize this then. From what you offered me, it seems like you might have been willing, all things considered, to offer a package, and the salaries pretty much would have worked, of Kyle Lowry, Tyler Hero, and let's say one first-round pick. Let's just say that for argument's sake, okay, Clay? That it would have been Lowry, it would have been Hero, and one first-round pick.
I just interrupt. I wouldn't have gone that far. It would have been either or with Tyler in the first-round pick.
I'm not even sure that offer, the one I offered and postulated there, would have been enough to satisfy the Nets, that they couldn't have done better elsewhere. Maybe not also because they're not taking Russell Westbrook back from the Lakers. This becomes moot anyway. But as you mentioned in our first segment here, the Slomin's Home Security Inside the Paint Show, you can catch that in our podcast, is that just because Kyrie's opting back in, he can still be traded by the Nets. They can still say at some point, screw this. Even though, we could bring him back, it's not working. What's the market out there? So let me ask you part B of the equation, since that's really where we are right now. We've moved on. Kyrie's under a 1-year remaining contract. Where he stands right now, he's fully tradable. Would you dare give up any assets of any value whatsoever for a player like Kyrie who could bolt after a season?
Assets? No. So, like, if you're telling me we're using Kyle, and the reason why I thought Kyle Lowry would make sense is he's a player that I think could actually work out okay with a Kevin Durant. And like, if you're Brooklyn, you look at this thing and you say, okay, we're really not that far away. If we get Kyle Lowry in, we get this chemistry going again. Maybe we add another piece. Who knows? Maybe Ben Simmons actually. So, like, I don't think Brooklyn was going to get assets for Kyrie Irving. I don't think anybody wanted him.
Clay, maybe that's the play. Maybe the play winds up being you wait and you tell them, hey, Kyle Lowry's at a close enough number to Kyrie where we can mix and match other contracts to make it work. So you know what, Brooklyn? If all of a sudden Kyrie doesn't show up to training camp, Kyrie doesn't show up for the home opener, Kyrie decides that, the vaccination things and he goes in a different direction and doesn't want to be around vaccinated people. Who knows? Some sort of cockamamie Kyrie thing. Maybe you come back and go quietly, because that's how the Heat operate. Hey, this is on the table for you. We want to develop our chemistry. We can do this in November. We can do this in December. We can get our chemistry with Kyrie. You can get your chemistry with Kyle. It is an extra year, and that does matter. And we can make it work down the line, so that's going to be interesting. Keep in mind also, if Tyler Hero gets his rookie scale extension, that deadline is the day before the season opener of the 22-23 season, he basically becomes untradeable. Because of the way the contract works, you have to wait till after the season. So he would be off the table in that scenario also. So there is a little bit of pressing there, whether it's the Heat, whether it's another team that gives Tyler Hero that extension. So that's playing also. A lot of these things tend to get pushed to the side, but not totally pushed out of the picture either. So we have to wait and see how that plays out as well. But I think for now, we're done with the Nets.
I'm reading this, man. It's crazy. People think that I've lost my mind. I'm going to ask this, Ira. Let me ask this, because this plays into the discussion here. Are you giving Tyler Hero a max contract after next year?
Well, it wouldn't be after next year. I'd actually have to do that extension before the season opener. He'd play this year's contract out at his $6.4 million or something like that, and then he'd move into it. They did with Bam Adebayo. Remember that in December 2020?
No. I mean, are you Ira Winderman? Are you paying Tyler Hero a max contract? Are you giving him max money? No,
I'm giving him the Jaylen Brown, Mikal Bridges sort of nice money. And again, I know there's inflation, but you should be able to make do with $25 million a year. That's the range I'm giving him. You're still talking 4 years, $100 million. You're still talking in that range. And I'm not sold that time. Matter of fact, put you on the spot, because that's what we do here in the Slomin's Home Security Inside the Paint show. Clay Ferraro, right now, who's the better player, Tyler Hero or Jaylen Brown?
Jaylen Brown, and it's not remotely close. Not even close.
So then you use that as your guidepost. That's a little bit over $100 million, a little bit over $25 million a year for 4 years. If that's your guidepost, it sounds like a maximum contract, but in our cockamamie NBA world, it's basically 2/3 of a maximum contract. So I think that's the guidepost. So let me bring the discussion back. You were talking maximum salary, Clay. I'm going to bring it back this way. Would you feel comfortable giving Tyler Hero $25 million a year, 4 years, $100 million?
No. And that's why when we're talking about trades and we're talking about these scenarios, you have to factor that in, because somebody is going to pay him. And if I'm the Miami Heat and I can take advantage of the fact that he has one more year left on the rookie scale deal, right? And you can make a win now move for somebody who can help your team, who would be a greater contributor to your team right now. And look, we can argue, we can debate whether or not Kyrie would even be able to play, would even choose to play, whatever it is. But you're risking, if you're not going to pay Tyler Hero that salary you're talking about, 4 years, $100 million, you're risking losing him for nothing. Nothing. He's going to walk away. Somebody's going to pay him.
I want to walk this back a little bit, because there is a parallel right now in today's market. I think we both respect James Jones, the person he is, and the job he's done in Phoenix.
Yep.
Last year at the extension deadline, he looked at DeAndre Ayton, a terrific rebounder, a very good defender, kind of scorer, and he said, I'm not giving you the max.
Yep.
And so instead, they let him go into restricted free agency, where he is now. The same thing would happen with Tyler. If by October 15th, the Heat don't reach an extension with him and it's tabled for the season, he becomes restricted for 2023 free agency. The Heat then still can match, allowed with bird rights, any outside offer, but they table it. Couple of factors in play here, Clay. Number one, we saw this a little bit with DeAndre Ayton this year. Does the player become jaded and soured because he wasn't taken care of? You are right. Whatever the number is for Tyler, $6.4 million this year, the Heat get him at a value deal. They say, let's deal with this next July when Ira's over in Europe. We'll deal with it then. And they wait till next summer. That is an option. That's what the Suns did with DeAndre Ayton, who is now a restricted free agent. So let's play the game with DeAndre Ayton. Do you think DeAndre Ayton is a max level free agent?
No,
Okay, so you
but
don't.
he's going to get that money from Detroit
Yes.
in all likelihood.
Well, let me
one
go.
of these teams.
Let me go back a year with you then, sort of put you on the spot, so everyone who watches Local 10 can put you on the spot, and the people in our chat group here. Was Bam Adebayo, not what he got, Clay Ferraro, was Bam Adebayo a max level free agent when the Heat gave him his max deal in December 2020?
He was for me, and I'm sorry. Like I know this runs counter, but the best way I can explain this, the best compliment I can give Bam is I've learned more about the game of basketball by watching him play. And when you just watch what he's able to do defensively, and you try to find anybody else in the league, look, I think Robert Williams was the defensive player in the year in the NBA, and yet you don't see him switching off onto point guards, onto ones, and doing what Bam's able to do on the perimeter like he does. Like now, when it comes to rim protection and weak side help, maybe you give Rob Williams the edge over Bam on that. But I see Bam as being arguably the second best defender in the entire NBA. And that's just me. And I thought he was that last year. I think he is the key to what everything Miami does, everything that Miami does offensively. On defensively, on offense, I think he is a B- player. So if you're telling me that he's an A+ on one end of the floor, and I think a B-, I think that's fair. Maybe B, whatever it is, but an A+,
it's interesting.
That's a max player to me.
So you're averaging out a B+, A- player as a max player, and maybe in today's NBA economy you have to. Again, the salary doesn't put you in the top 10 or top 15. It's also what you need to do to run your team.
Exactly, yes.
And I get that. So what I'm trying to say is to bring this full circle. I think the Heat are sitting back and seeing what happens to DeAndre Ayton. Can you go to restricted free agency, wind up with a player getting a reasonably priced offer sheet, whether it's from Detroit, whether it's from the Knicks, whether it's from Indiana, and then you could say, good, that's a price point. Thanks, DeAndre, for playing our game show. You went out there, you found an equitable number for you that the league believes you're valued and will match it. The only problem you have with that is where does that leave the player mentally? Does the player say, this team didn't have faith in me? This team didn't take care of me? Some players, it's an absolute blot on their career. Scottie Pippen couldn't take it after a while in Chicago, being the second wheel, and then with Tony Kukoc, at times the third wheel, and it never was the same. Other players, they get taken care of. They get their restricted free agency deal. They move on. It's a question of how much does Tyler want to be here, prefer to be with the Heat, or maybe prefer to be a leading man in Sacramento or some B-level, C-level, D-level team. You don't know also. I agree. I would not be shocked, Clay, if the Heat do not do an extension with Tyler Herro. If they move it into restricted free agency, if they let it play out, and the whole thing there is, where do they think mental stability-wise, do they wind up losing Tyler Herro up here for the season because he wasn't taken care of? And that brings back to what we were talking about at the end of our first segment today on the Slomin's Home Security Inside the Paint show, and that's the Victor Oladipo factor. Because no other team has something like that. We have a former All-Star working its way back, reasonably priced. So instead of having to go $100 million for Tyler Herro for 4 years, plus the $6 he makes this year for $106 million, you might be able to get Victor Oladipo the next 3 years for $36 million, just because he's glad to be back and getting into the sort of 8-figure range also. There's a lot of interesting math playing out for the Heat. The good thing for the Heat is that Tyler Herro is, number one, a later issue in the offseason, the extension, but they can put him in play now. If they come to the conclusion, we will never match what Tyler wants on the restricted free agent market, let's get something now, or we could still get a great value year out of the player and then worry about it down the road. So there are a lot of different things there on that sort of beautiful mind, higher math board that Andy Ellisberg has in play also.
Two people saying Bam is not a max player. I'm sorry. Like it's just I cut it off at that discussion. Like you can't watch what he does for this team and not believe he's a max player. There's no way to have a reasonable debate.
The definition of a max player is a player you build your team around. This team has built its team around Bam Adebayo. The defensive system, if it needed a name, people go, what kind of defense do the Heat play? They play Bam Adebayo defense. And so when you have that, right? What kind of offense do they play, Clay? They play Jimmy Butler offense. We've seen that in the best of times in these playoffs, that were just completed and what he did. So if you build any aspect of your game, maybe outside of special teams in the NBA, around a player, he's your max player. Jimmy Butler, max player offensively, even though he's not one of the league's leading scorers. Bam Adebayo, max player defensively, even though he might not even be all-star level sometimes. You do that. NBA teams, you can have two. When you get to 3 and 4, they damn well all better be great in that big three, because like the Lakers saw with Davis, Westbrook, and LeBron, you don't have a goddamn penny to spend otherwise.
What would a special teams player in the NBA be? Would that be a jump ball specialist? Is that like honestly, you just bring him back?
There are guys, defensive pests. Patrick Beverley is a special teams player. Marcus Garrett, who's going to Summer League with the Heat, is a special teams player. A Hassan Whiteside, shot blocker, rebounder, is a special teams player. And that was the mistake the Heat made with Hassan's contract. He was a specialist. He was a special teams guy. He was not a build your team around. There was a time the Heat thought they could build around Hassan Whiteside. There was a time the Heat were wrong. Those kind of players should get nice contracts. Even Duncan Robinson is a special teams player. I think the Heat overpaid for that special teams player. That's where they are right now with him and his contract.
But to your point about that, and we'll get to this on the other side, there's a reason why you give Duncan Robinson the contract that you did, and it's because of the situation that you're in right now. Coming up, I want to look at reasonable, realistic offseason predictions for this team. Ira gives us his poo-poo platter idea that he's been talking about for the last couple of weeks. That and more next here on Inside the Paint.
This is the Big O Show.